7 bizarre World War II weapons you won't believe existed. World War II, a global conflict of unimaginable scale and destruction, was also a breeding ground for invention. Today, we're diving deep into the annals of military history to unearth 7 of the strangest weapons conceived during World War II. So, buckle up, folks, as we explore the weird, the wacky, and the downright unbelievable side of World War II weaponry. Picture this. The year is 1942. The United States, still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor, is looking for ways to strike back at the Japanese home islands. Now, imagine a plan so audacious, so outside the box, that it could only have been dreamt up in the pressure cooker of total war weaponized bats. The man behind this feathered fury, a Pennsylvania dentist by the name of Little S. Adams. Adams, inspired by a trip to Carlsbad Caverns, envisioned these creatures each carrying a small incendiary device released over Japanese cities. Japan, with its largely wooden architecture, was particularly vulnerable to fire. The bats, naturally nocturnal and adept at finding concealed spaces, would roost in the eaves and attics of buildings, igniting their payloads and setting off widespread fires. Believe it or not, this batty plan made it all the way to the Oval Office, where it caught the attention of none other than President Roosevelt himself. Intrigued, Roosevelt gave the project the green light, and millions of dollars were poured into research and development. Thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats were captured and recruited into this furry air force. Tests were conducted with mixed results. In one instance, a mock-up of a Japanese village went up in flames, seemingly proving the concept's potential. By 1944, with the tide of the war turning and concerns about the project's practicality mounting, the Bat Bomb project was scrapped. As the war raged on, and the Allied bombing campaign over Germany intensified, the skies above the Third Reich became a maelstrom of fire and steel. Desperate to counter the Allied air superiority, Hitler turned his attention to a series of increasingly outlandish projects, among them the Windkanone, or wind cannon. Conceived by German engineers, the wind cannon was, as its name suggests, a cannon that fired not shells but highly compressed air. The idea was to create a powerful vortex, a man-made tornado of sorts, that would knock Allied bombers out of the sky. Early prototypes of the wind cannon were built and tested, and while they were capable of shattering wooden planks at close range, their effectiveness against actual aircraft remained dubious at best. Several full-scale wind cannons were constructed, enormous, ungainly contraptions that resembled oversized trumpets pointed skyward. In actual combat, the wind cannon proved to be a colossal failure. The compressed air blasts, while capable of creating impressive gusts of wind at close range, dissipated rapidly over distance, rendering them utterly useless against high-flying bombers. The wind cannon was a testament to the dangers of technological hubris, rushed into production before its flaws could be adequately addressed. The vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the so-called Mid-Atlantic Gap, posed a significant challenge to the Allied war effort. German U-boats lurking beneath the waves preyed on convoys, sinking vital supplies destined for Britain. To combat this menace, the Allies needed a way to extend their air cover in this critical region. Enter Geoffrey Pyke, a British inventor with a penchant for the unorthodox, and his brainchild project Habakkuk. Pyke envisioned a fleet of massive, unsinkable aircraft carriers, not made of steel but of a curious substance known as pykrete. Pykrete, a mixture of ice and wood pulp, was surprisingly strong, even more so than concrete in some respects. It was also buoyant and crucially slow to melt, especially when reinforced with a network of cooling pipes. A prototype, albeit a scaled-down one, was constructed on Patricia Lake in Canada. This 60-foot-long, 1,000-ton test vessel, dubbed the Habakkuk Burgle, proved the viability of pykrete as a building material. However, despite the promise of the prototype, Project Habakkuk was not without its drawbacks. The sheer logistical challenges of constructing and deploying these massive ice ships, coupled with advances in long-range aircraft and escort carriers, ultimately led to the project's demise in 1943. Chapter 4: Exploding Rats, a Tale of Espionage and Fear. In the shadowy world of espionage and sabotage, one particularly bizarre weapon emerged from the British Special Operations Executive, or SOE, the exploding rat. The SOE's plan involved using dead rats, their lifeless bodies stuffed with plastic explosives as a means of disrupting German industrial production. The idea was deceptively simple. The SOE reasoned that German factory workers, upon discovering a dead rat, would likely dispose of it in the most expedient way possible, by tossing it into the nearest furnace or boiler. These boilers, essential for powering factories, would then, in theory, explode when the rat's explosive payload detonated. To further enhance the plan's effectiveness, the SOE went to great lengths to make the dead rats appear as lifelike as possible. They were skinned, their insides replaced with explosives, and then carefully sewn back together. While the exploding rat scheme may sound like the stuff of a bad spy film, the SOE was deadly serious. They even went so far as to acquire a sizable stockpile of dead rats, over 100 in total for this purpose. The very first shipment of exploding rats, intercepted by the Germans, never reached their intended targets. Chapter 5. The Panjandrum D-Day's Runaway Wheel of Destruction. The beaches of Normandy, June 6, 1944. A date etched in history, a day that marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's grip on Europe. But before the Allied forces could even set foot on those heavily fortified beaches, they faced a formidable obstacle, the Atlantic Wall. To breach this seemingly impenetrable barrier, the Allies needed something special, something unconventional, something like the Panjandrum. Conceived by a team of British inventors including Neville Shute Norway, the Panjandrum was an unusual contraption. Imagine a pair of enormous bicycle wheels, each 10 feet in diameter, connected by a central drum packed with explosives. Now, picture this monstrous wheel rolling towards enemy lines, propelled by a series of rockets strapped to its outer rims. It was designed to be launched from landing craft, race up the beaches at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, and detonate against the concrete walls of German fortifications, creating a breach for Allied troops to exploit. The Panjandrum's maiden test run, however, proved to be something of a spectacle, and not in a good way. Instead of gracefully rolling towards its target, the Panjandrum, upon ignition, began to veer wildly off course, its rockets firing erratically. Despite numerous attempts to tame this unruly beast, the Panjandrum remained stubbornly resistant to control. In the end, the Panjandrum proved to be more trouble than it was worth, a spectacular failure. Chapter 6. Anti-Tank Dogs, Canine Kamikazes of the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front of World War II, a brutal, unforgiving theater of conflict, witnessed some of the most desperate and unconventional tactics employed during the war. Among these was the Soviet use of anti-tank dogs, four-legged soldiers pressed into service against the might of the German panzers. The idea behind anti-tank dogs was, in principle, straightforward. Dogs, trained to associate tanks with food, would be fitted with explosives and released towards enemy lines. The dogs, driven by their training and instinct, would seek out the nearest tank, hoping for a meal, and detonate their payload, disabling or destroying the enemy armor. The Soviets, facing a critical shortage of anti-tank weapons in the early stages of the war, saw this as a viable solution. Tens of thousands of dogs, mostly stray or donated animals, were recruited into this canine corps. Training was rigorous, often cruel, and involved starving the dogs and then rewarding them with food placed under tanks. When the time came for deployment, the dogs, each fitted with a harness carrying explosives, were released towards the advancing German tanks. However, in practice, the anti-tank dog program proved to be far less effective than the Soviets had hoped. The dogs, disoriented by the noise and chaos of battle, often failed to distinguish between Soviet and German tanks, leading to unintended consequences. Chapter 7. The Krumlauf shooting around corners. Imagine a rifle that could fire around corners, allowing soldiers to engage the enemy without exposing themselves to direct fire. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but during World War II, the Germans attempted to turn this concept into a reality with the Krumlauf, a rifle with a curved barrel. Developed in response to the close-quarters urban warfare that characterized the latter stages of the war, the Krumlauf was intended to give German soldiers an edge in street fighting. The rifle, a modified version of the Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle, featured a curved barrel attachment that could be fitted to the muzzle. This attachment, bent at either 30, 45, or even 90 degrees, contained a series of small holes designed to vent gas and reduce muzzle velocity, preventing the bullet from ricocheting wildly. Initial tests of the Krumlauf showed promise, but the curved barrel attachment had a short lifespan, often becoming unusable after only a few hundred rounds. The bullets, subjected to immense centrifugal forces as they traveled through the curved barrel, tended to tumble in flight, reducing accuracy. Furthermore, the Krumlauf was a complex and expensive weapon to produce, requiring specialized tooling and skilled labor. Outro lessons from the weird side of war. So, there you have it, 7 of the strangest weapons of World War II, each a testament to the boundless ingenuity and sometimes the desperation of wartime innovation. Which of these bizarre inventions surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing historical content.